Welcome to the Valve Studio. This is part 5 of my interview with Willie, aka Lord Valve. And in this segment, we're actually talking about his designs that he sells and markets there at NBS Electronics called the Napper line. And there's another amplifier that I didn't know about called the Nipper, which is a little bit smaller version. And there's 3 aspects of that I was interested in. He has a knob that he calls the soul knob and the soul control. And he talks about what that actually does in terms of the aspects of how it affects the feedback. He talks about the triode versus pentode operation for the output tubes that he has selected. And then the last thing we talk about is the bright switch. So sit back and enjoy. If you haven't watched the other segments at all, go ahead and gain a little wisdom from the guy who's been doing this for a long time. There's 7 segments total. This is number 5. Let's turn it over to Lord Valve. Okay, so your Napper amps have some additional features that most amplifiers don't have.
Right.
They have adjustable feedback, and they also have they can switch between triode and pentode operation. So talk about your soul control and how it actually affects the amount of feedback and what
the soul control is but simple, man. The entire circuit consists of a pot. That's it. All we do is put it in series with the stock feedback resistor, which in most Fender output stages is 820 ohms. Mm-hmm. And you take a pot, whatever I got laying around, 5K, 10K, 25 or 50K if the guy really wants to dump a lot of his negative feedback. You put it in series with the feedback resistor and let him set it where he likes it.
So it's just.
And I tell him, if you don't like it, turn all the way down. It's not there when it's turned all the way down.
So it really just changes the amount of feedback, not the frequency response.
That's right. No, it's not a presence control.
Okay. Okay.
I've thought about doing that, but the people seem to like the way it is so much, and most of them guys wind up turning it up to about 7 or 8, and they just leave it there forever.
Okay.
Unless they need an exceptionally clean tone for something they're recording, and then they'll turn it down.
Add more feedback to it.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, I have to tell them that it's counterintuitive. When you turn it up, it's actually less feedback, which makes the amp a little grittier and also a little noisier,
Yeah.
and gives it a little bit more gain. I say, you may like that. And the way I tell them is, look, if it's turned all the way down, what you basically have is the black face value. And when it's turned all the way up, you're more into the tweed region, although some of the tweed amps didn't have any at all.
Okay. You made these Napper amps, people came in, and I've talked to somebody who has one and they love it. They're like, oh, that's the best thing.
Yeah, everybody who's got one, except for one guy, and he hasn't got it anymore, loves those amplifiers, man. You can't find a used one.
Do they? Why would they switch it over to triode?
Oh, well, of course you're going to get, it's going to go down to about 1/3 of its normal power. Mm-hmm. It's going to get a little bit darker, okay? Not a whole lot, but you can hear it.
Yep.
And you can run the preamp hotter, so you can get distortion earlier.
Okay.
Because it's less power.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, it doesn't get that much quieter.
You're right. It does not.
No, it doesn't. It's not as much as you'd think. You'd think, I'm going to cut it down to 1/3 power, but it's 1/3 power, but it's not 1/3 volume.
Right. Oh, okay.
It gets softer, but not as much as you might think.
Mm-hmm. And do you find that that guitarists actually know that they specifically want that?
You mean, do they desire to have that control, or once they have it, do they like the way it sounds?
No, it's like somebody comes in and they say, I specifically want a triode output stage for an amplifier. I specifically want that. Can you make that for me? Or do they really kind of equate that those characteristics that you just mentioned based on the power output?
Well, a triode connected, it was tetrode actually is what those tubes are, 6V6, 6L6. A triode connected tetrode, it's not really a triode, but it's being operated like one.
Right, because you're just connecting the screen to the light.
Yes. You still have some resistance in there, of course. You don't want them in direct parallel. But if somebody is really, saying, I want triode, well, I'll pick a triode power tube of some sort, and build them an amp with it. And I've only done one or two of those,
Why did they want that?
Because they read it on the internet.
Okay.
I'm sure. I know that's the reason.
Because they probably haven't heard one anywhere.
Yeah, well, I had one guy who listened to the triode connection in one of my Napa amps and said, "Well, I really like that," and can you build an amp that does that all the time? And I said, "Well, yeah, I could wire a triode." And he said, "No, well, how about because he'd been doing some reading up. He said, "How about using a triode?" I don't remember which one I used, man. It's currently built though by the Russians, I think. I don't remember what it was.
Oh, it's an in production triode.
Yeah, and it was single ended too, because we wanted low power.
And you can get the single ended transformers, the size you want from Mercury.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if they don't have it, they'll build it for you. Whatever, you just tell them what tube you're using,
And what's the additional cost for custom build on something like that at a onesie price?
They're pretty well. If you want them to like clone a transformer or something like that, they're pretty well $300, $300-400.
Right.
But after that, they'll sell it to you once they've built it and cloned it or whatever. They'll sell it to you for a pretty reasonable price.
Okay.
I've got like my larger Napa amp, the Jazz version with the 44 watt output stage and the 15. I'm using a transformer that I got from the people that made the rocket amps. What was that company? They made a rack-mounted tube effects processor. They were one of the first people. Now, see, I can't remember their darn name. But when they went out of business, they built. They were building these amps called Rocket, and they were 10-watt amps used as single EL84 and a 12-inch speaker in an old-style rounded TV-looking type cabinet. Pretty good sounding amp. But instead of using an air gap transformer like you normally would for that, they bought a real heavy 80-watt output transformer that was non-air gap and used it for that. Well, when they went out of business, I bought like 20 of those because they were cheap. They were just getting rid of all their parts and stuff. Was it ADL? ADL? I'm trying to remember who that was. Anyway, I'm down to about 4 or 5 of them now. That's what I've been using in those 44 watt Jazz amps.
Those as for push pull?
I'm sorry? Push pull, yeah. And that, of course, that was an 80 watt transformer. It was built for 4 tubes, so I have to, select the speaker according and the taps accordingly to get it to match right. But Mercury is going to wind up building that transformer for me. When I get down to about 2 of them, I'm going to send them one, which gets destroyed in the process of being. Apart. But they said, "Yeah, we'll make it for you, and we'll put your name on it, and make it all fancy." And
there you go. Let's come up with a logo.
Yeah, whatever.
You have a bright switch on those?
Yes, it's well. See, the chassis I use is a Princeton Reverb chassis, which doesn't have a hole for a bright switch. But what I used was a CTS 1 meg pot with a pull switch on it.
Okay.
So you pull it out, the bright switch is engaged. Also on the other end, where the soul control is, there's also a gain boost, which changes the value of one resistor in the PI stage to up the drive a bit, and that's also a pull switch.
What do you end up changing on the bright switch? Where does it actually engage or disengage?
It's just the capacitor that goes across the volume control.
Mm-hmm.
It switches it in and out, just like a Fender does.
Okay.
I use a slightly different value than Fender uses.
How did you decide on what the value is going to be? How bright is bright?
I listen to it. Mine's pretty bright.
Okay.
I kind of like that. It's probably because my shitty hearing. I'm 70, almost. Yeah. I'm almost 70, you know, and I've definitely lost some of my high end, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.